What is Lady Deathstrike's arms anatomy? What all the X-rays of her arms tell us? And what's wrong with them? This video answers these and other fascinating questions related to the movie X-Men 2. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and support the video with your activity. This is very important for me. Lady Deathstrike, also known as Yuriko Oyama, is a charismatic and memorable antagonist in X-Men United, primarily remembered for her impressive boss fight with our old acquaintance Logan. In this short video, I want to draw your attention to some interesting details of Yuriko's anatomy shown in the sequel. Trust me, there are some. But first, let's start with the comic titled X-Men 2 movie prequel Nightcrawler. Yes, in anticipation of the release of X-Men 2, a series of comics set in the universe was published. This comic series describes what happened between the first and second parts of the film. In particular, in the comic dedicated to Nightcrawler's backstory, we see Yuriko for the first time. Kurt Wagner was kidnapped by William Stryker to brainwash him later. Remember, at the beginning of the second part, Kurt, forced by Stryker, attempts to assassinate the president. While Kurt is imprisoned at Stryker's camp at Alkali Lake, a tortured mutant is put into a cell, a mutant who turns out to be a girl. Kind-hearted Kurt tries to calm her down and tells her that they still have hope of escaping this cruel place. The moment the girl starts screaming, we can take a closer look at her. We can see scars on her face, scars that remain after the procedure Stryker put her through. Soon we understand why she begins screaming. She starts feeling terrible pain as very long claws grow from her fingers. And here we realize that this is none other than Yuriko, who's undergone a horrific procedure to implant adamantium into her body. The scars on Yuriko's face and hands serve as an evidence of localized surgery, similar to what we saw in Logan's nightmares, from which we understood that the implantation of adamantium into his body happened gradually, locally, over a long time, and without serious anesthesia. Yuriko had to go through the same torture. Same as for Logan, Stryker temporarily suppressed her reactive healing abilities to make the surgery possible. Thus, her body still bore stitched wounds from the procedure. At Yuriko's screams and Kurt's calls for help, guards burst into the cell. One of them is surprised that Yuriko still has claws. He thought those hellish things had been removed during the surgery. This means that Yuriko had her own organic claws before the surgery. And what's most important, let's see how Yuriko's claws look here in the comics. They differ significantly from what we see in the film. In particular, here her claws are not just adamantium embedded in her anatomy. They look more like bioengineering or techno-organics, a symbiosis of adamantium and organic merged into one. It's clear that Yuriko's claws grow directly from her fingers. When inactive, they are not in her forearms. We'll see it in the film on one of the X-rays. And this is the end of Yuriko's story in this comic. Does this mean that the anatomy of Yuriko's claws in the film differs significantly from the anatomy of her claws in the comic? Let's go step by step. And yes, to start with, let's look closely at the X-ray images of Yuriko's arms, which will provide us with a lot of interesting information on her physiology, including enhancements made by Stryker. First, we see one more confirmation that Yuriko was born with organic claws. Remember, in the first film's concept, for example, Logan did not have organic claws. Stryker created adamantium blades for him from scratch. Note that Yuriko has significantly more wrist bones than an average human. In fact, she has twice as many metacarpal and phalangeal bones. Why is that so? We touched on this briefly in a separate video about Logan. Yuriko's mutation provided for less painful activation of her claws compared to Logan. When Logan protracts his claws, they literally tear through flesh and all the bone structure of his hands. For Yuriko, the process is evolutionarily more refined. Her anatomy allows for more free space inside her arms for the claws and for their activation. But this doesn't mean that the process of protracting her claws is completely painless and injury-free. No. It is just less painful and less injurious compared to Logan's. Here, Yuriko screams in pain, and here the expression of her face changes, showing us that protracting her claws is not very pleasant for her. After all, they come out from under her nails. So what else do we see in these Yuriko's X-rays? Of course, we see that her claws are inside her forearms when they are inactive, similar to Logan. Here in the forearm, we see a metal pin, which in combination with these elastic elements resembling tendons, but in this case they are not tendons, is designated for extending the claws. Yes, ideally the nervous system should control the claw protraction, since she had them from birth, but let's assume that Stryker made certain upgrades there. added metal guiding channels in the knuckles area to stabilize the claw protraction process. Additionally, Stryker secured Yuriko's wrists to prevent the wrist bones from sliding apart during claw protraction, which we also saw in Logan's case. He equipped the distal phalanges of her fingers with substantial fasteners to prevent the claws from being ripped out of her fingers. From this angle, we may see how these fasteners are implanted into her bones using pins. In other words, Stryker primarily used down-to-earth, let's put it this way, methods of osteosynthesis, and compared to pretty much everything we saw in X-Men Origins Wolverine, this is more realistic, as far as we can judge in the format of a movie comic, of course. So, if you've already thought that Yuriko's anatomy in the film does not match what we saw in the prequel comic at all, don't rush to conclusions. The scene where Yuriko protracts her claws in the film completely contradicts everything we see in these X-rays, since here in these scenes we clearly see that Yuriko's claws have a segmented structure and they protract in a telescopic manner. This means the segments of the claws slide one out of another, and this does not match what we saw in the X-ray, where the claws have a full metal structure and stay in the forearms when inactive. These segmented claws are definitely not located in the forearms, as when protracting her claws, Yuriko bends her wrists. If the claws were hidden in her forearms, they would protract not from her fingers, but rather from the wrist area, which is what Drunken Logan once did. Thanks to their segmented telescopic design, these claws are in a folded state within Yuriko's fingers. I'd highlight it once again, in her fingers. Therefore, her fingers make a characteristic metallic sound when she stretches them in this scene. However, one shouldn't assume that the film contradicts itself regarding Yuriko's anatomy. These X-rays of Yuriko, like all other X-rays in Stryker's lab, reflect only part of his work. This may only represent an intermediate stage of his technology for implanting adamantium into mutant bodies, and Yuriko, being Stryker's test subject and deprived of her free will, could have undergone numerous procedures to alter her anatomy. Logan could have undergone many procedures too, but he managed to escape from Stryker's camp. However, Yuriko, controlled by Stryker through his mutant subjugation technology, did not manage to escape. It's possible that Kurt Wagner witnessed the results of the latest surgical intervention in Yuriko's anatomy, during which Stryker significantly restructured her arms to enhance the claw's functionality. But in this case, with its bioengineering nuances, the comics show that well. This isn't all I can tell you about Yuriko, as we know that according to the universe's law, she didn't die after having a significant amount of adamantium injected into her body. How did she survive? Yes, there's a lot to discuss together on this topic. Comment if you're interested in it, and I'll make a video about it. For now, thank you for watching this one. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and support the video with your activity. It's very important to me. Bye!